All right, that's it. Dishonor. Dishonor on your whole family. Dishonor on you. Dishonor on your cow.
Disney's Mulan live-action adaptation sucks. It's absolutely terrible. It is easily the most underwhelming, disappointing, and insulting movie released in 2020, and it is by far, at least in my eyes, the worst that I've seen this year. I can't say it's the worst Disney live-action adaptation because I haven't seen any of the other ones. I had no interest in Beauty and the Beast because I never saw the animated version, but apparently the live-action adaptation was really good. The Lion King, by all accounts, was absolutely terrible, as was the Aladdin live-action adaptation. And the reason I had no interest in those adaptations was because they had no business being made in the first place. Now, aside from Mulan being my favorite Disney movie and heroine, the reason I was salivating for a live-action remake is because this time round, it was actually warranted. Mulan is easily, on paper, the best candidate for a Disney live-action adaptation. An epic action-adventure fantasy coming-of-age story, the potential for large epic battles of the Chinese army fighting against the invading Han army amidst the high mountain passes of China and the Forbidden City itself. Along with all the music sing-alongs we know and love, Eddie Murphy's fan-favorite Little Dragon, and excellent actors that can take up the mantle of Mulan, Shang, Yao, Ling, Chimpo, Fa Zhu, Shan Yu, and all the classic characters we loved and adored for over 2 decades. And what happened? We got virtually none of those things. None of it. Disney massacred Mulan in every conceivable way. It was absolutely abysmal. I heard Beauty and the Beast, while being a good Disney live-action adaptation, faithful to its source material, was also criticized for being too similar to its animated counterpart, to the point of being almost redundant. But instead of using what every human being supposedly has called the brain, and making a live adaptation that stays true to the animated version, and the original ballad of which the animated version is based on, with a few new fresh elements, did Disney just say, let's remove every single lovable element from what made this movie so popular and profitable in the first place, thinking that would appease the critics of Beauty and the Beast by making Mulan different, to shamelessly pander to the market of China by removing all of the Western elements, by announcing they're going to make a more gritty, realistic version of the tale, and still screwing up the core of what Mulan is by watering down all of the elements that make this one of the greatest tales ever told. Chinese audiences are not going to like your version, Disney, because it's obvious here you don't understand the character whatsoever. Because it's pretty obvious whoever was in charge of Disney back in 1998 has obviously left the company, as this movie evidently shows. And the Western audiences of the United States, Canada, South America, the UK, and Australia are going to absolutely hate this product because you actively excluded everything they loved about Mulan in the first place. Disney's marketing team is so unfathomably stupid. They're pandering to an audience that isn't particularly fond of them to begin with, solely on the basis that the Chinese breed like rabbits, while making sure to piss off the audience that actually loves them. I can understand changing a few things about the Mulan animated version and the ballad for a fresh cinematic experience of the same story. Why not add some more sing-alongs? Some more comic side characters or main characters, as long as they don't interfere with what the core of the story is. There is a way to connect the story to both audiences and appease everybody. There is a way, despite what some may think. This is not the way to do it. There is no moderation here whatsoever. They didn't remove some songs. They removed every song. They didn't remove some comedy to make it more gritty story. They removed all of it. They wanted to make the movie more gritty and realistic and down to earth. The film was clean as hell despite the violence, of which has been Disneyfied to oblivion, so it doesn't feel real. It feels like cookie cutter shit. You removed 2 fan-favorite characters, Eddie Murphy's Mushu, the lovable, tiny, charismatic, scheming, fire-breathing dragon, and Shang, Mulan's commanding officer, who's easily one of the best side characters in all of Disney, and who sings arguably the greatest movie montage in history, and what's worse is the PR bullshit you use to justify these inexcusable exclusions from what makes the animated classic so great. In your marketing, you say you excluded Mushu because you didn't want to insult the ballad that the Chinese people hold so sacred apparently, yet you simultaneously want to preach the demonetize if I mention it movement, and are actively excluding a black voice actor from your cast, despite you and your company preaching diversity vomit from the mouth every time you're on a goddamn camera. And that's not even counting Shang, who your PR team said was excluded from the film for another demonetized if I mention movement, because Mulan having a love interest superior officer would have been too offensive apparently, when in actuality Mulan is the one who falls in love with Shang, and Shang only figures out his feelings by the end of the movie when he goes to Mulan's house and she invites him in to dinner, in front of her whole family under their supervision. And this was apparently too offensive for the modern political climate. Grow up, Disney. And that's not even mentioning how you bait the marketing of this film with Christina Aguilera's updated rendition of the classic song Reflection from the 1998 animated Mulan classic, only to exclude that song as well as the others for the entirety of the movie and only play the advertised song and its lyrics during the credits. Like, why even market it in the first place? Oh, because you were banking on the magic of Old Glory to sell this comparative dumpster fire. Your reasoning for making your film a lesser product in every discernible way is so fundamentally broken and disgusting, and your attempts to pander to the worst of all audiences, being the Twitter-deluded psychopaths that continue to lose you money, is so pathetically hollow that it is just so gratifying as a fan of the original Mulan animated film to continue to watch your reputation crash and burn. Anyway, back to the movie itself. So why did I hate it? Why does it fail at almost everything it tries to do? Well, I'll tell you. Besides giving the middle finger to fans on both sides of the spectrum, the biggest sin of this movie is undoubtedly how it almost entirely ruins and fundamentally changes the character of Mulan to fit the deluded 2020 Hollywood persona of what a strong female character should be. I made this video almost a year ago. Take a good look. I feared the worst for this movie and this character for a long time, based on Disney's track record with female characters in recent past productions and on the marketing itself. I had no idea just how accurate I would end up being, and on this occasion I was furious that I just so happened to be right. Instead of keeping Mulan true to the funny, clumsy, humorous, down-to-earth and well-spirited girl who struggles to find her place in the world and fights to survive in dire circumstances like the character from the animated classic, this iteration of Mulan is flat, dry, stoic, boring, and almost completely unrecognizable. And unlike having to work for all of her skills and earn the respect of her peers through sheer determination and intellect, Disney bullshits a power from Dragon Ball Z called Chi, which, unlike Dragon Ball, is a fighting power that makes regular humans extremely powerful, acrobatic, and skilled, and essentially perfect in every way. Chi in Dragon Ball Z becomes stronger if you train and work for it. Chi in Mulan just makes Mulan an all-powerful god. Yes, Disney turned this incredible character from their own library of classic Disney movies and they made her into a Mary Sue. Listen to what I'm saying here. They turned Mulan, arguably the greatest female character in human literature, and turned her into a Mary Sue. She's essentially the Captain Marvel of the Disney live-action adaptations, by which I mean she doesn't work for anything. It's an illusion. It's framed as the same coming-of-age story, but all the development she goes through is weightless, because she's already the most powerful person in China, because her chi level is over 9,000. The only thing holding her back, like Captain Marvel, is herself, her own lack of belief in themselves. While she's training and fighting, she has to actually take it easy on all the other soldiers until some witch character, which we are going to get into, convinces her to come out of her shell, and then Mulan just relinquishes her disguise and fights on the battlefield as a woman to convey a message that women shouldn't be afraid to be themselves. But this is stupid because she essentially commits suicide by blowing her cover voluntarily, whereas in the animated version, her cover was blown by circumstance. Mulan in the animated version was wounded, and to treat her wounds, her doctors discovered her secret. She wasn't killed because she had already earned Shang's respect by that point. And even then, she was still exiled. It's the only thing that saved her life, in fact, was working hard and earning the respect of her peers. In this movie, she doesn't get wounded. She gets hit by a ninja star that has killed every armored soldier it has hit in the past, but in her case leaves her completely unscathed, and she chooses to reveal her identity because pretending to be a man was limiting her fighting power, because she believes it was. So why doesn't she just leave the disguise on and just be herself again until the battle is over? Like I said, Mulan is very similar to Captain Marvel, being that she's already the most powerful through the entire runtime of the film, which heavily impacts the stakes of the film and ultimately ruins the message the films are trying to convey about overcoming obstacles, because there's nothing really to overcome. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but what makes Captain Marvel less of a Mary Sue than this iteration of Mulan is that Mulan has her power since childhood. In the opening sequence of the film, she's doing ridiculous parkour and acrobatics with precision skill. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stared open-mouthed at the screen at just how unfathomably wrong they got the character. And Disney wanted to appease the Chinese audience with this? This iteration of Hua Mulan isn't anything close to the Disney animated classic, and it doesn't even have anything to do with the original Chinese ballad from long ago. It is Disneyfied, woke Hollywood fanfiction garbage. Mulan in both the animated classic had to fight for everything she had. Mulan, the live-action remake, has the same story, essentially driven by the same circumstances as the 1998 film, but it fails at every turn where the original succeeded. It tells a different version of Mulan, but at the same time it tries to ape off the original Disney classic with hollow references that fall flat on their face instead of warming the audience's heart with nostalgia and helping us get attached to the character. They just spit in our face. Almost like those references are there to spite the fans, like a dangling carrot that's meant to tease us of something more faithful to what we all loved about this tale. Let me run through a long list of examples and compare the live-action adaptation of Mulan with the animated classic. We'll go through all the scenes and I'll explain why the live-action adaptation fails in comparison to the original. The matchmaker scene mentions the song "Bring Honor to Us All," but it's never sung. The matchmaker scene still ends with embarrassment, but Mulan is essentially punished for doing the right thing, which the matchmaker should know from her point of view while it transpires. Whereas in the animated version, the matchmaker just thinks Mulan is a clumsy idiot because she doesn't know Mulan was trying to help her. The scene where Mulan gets shouted down at the dinner table is portrayed in a manner where she isn't allowed to speak, where in the animated version it was much more of a fleshed out conversation. So much of that impact was lost. When Mulan makes her decision to leave her family and fight in the army, it just cuts to her praying to her ancestors in her father's suit of armor, but it completely cuts out the epic montage from the animated version that lets us feel the weight of her choice. Along with referencing the ancestors from the animated version, none of them appear in the movie like in the animated film, and there's Mushu Easter eggs littered about, but Mushu is portrayed in the film as a guardian phoenix who just shows Mulan how to get places, or just to show up and provide a cool shot of Mulan for the camera. That's it. That's the extent of Mushu in this film. It's like they knew we wanted him and they were actively teasing us. Mulan's introduction to the army pales in comparison to the animated version because there's no humor, there's no establishing of characters. Yao Ling and Chimpo are in this film, but they have lost all charisma and charm. As a matter of fact, they are so unrecognizable that I couldn't tell who was which. We get to meet Mulan's beta male, who I still can't remember his name, and an admittedly cool entrance for Donnie Yen, but this means we miss out on Captain Li Shang and his character's backstory and setup because he was split into two lesser characters. Yeah, in case you didn't know, they split Shang into Donnie Yang and Mulan's beta male because having a superior officer that just so happens to be attractive to the main female protagonist was considered offensive. So they gave Mulan an equal, and they gave Mulan an older superior officer who couldn't possibly be her love interest. It didn't matter that Li Shang was a young man given an enormous responsibility due to nepotism despite his inexperience, and who only wanted to make his father proud, since his father was general of the Chinese army and he had a lot to live up to. No. It doesn't matter that Li Shang was an actual character. He's got abs. And he's a captain, and he's attractive, so Hollywood says he's gotta go. Then this movie has the audacity to reference Mulan's most famous song, "I'll Make a Man Out of You," but they completely screw the pooch. The song isn't sung, and there's no such montage. The name of the song is only spoken aloud, once again as a cheap reference with no substance that just honestly pissed me off. The training itself that Mulan undertakes is hollow as hell. There's some good choreography, but Mulan's skill and athletic ability when she uses her powers is so unnatural, forced, and ridiculous, it made it impossible to take seriously or be invested in. And it hardly counts as any character development because, again, she's actively trying to take the training lightly. And then she has this moment where she performs this incredible physical feat by carrying buckets of water at shoulder height all the way up an entire mountain. And then it plays a small hint of the song Reflection without its lyrics to recognize this incredible achievement of hers. But once again, it fails. It falls flat because Mulan didn't earn it. She just used her power that makes her better than everyone, and that's how she did it. This is a miserable attempt to recreate one of the most cathartic montage moments in film history. The only thing that rivals Mulan using her determination and intellect to be the first soldier to grab the arrow from the top of the post, with all of her comrades cheering her on, is when Rocky climbs the steps with half of Philadelphia running behind him in Rocky 2. The live-action adaptation missed the mark on this so spectacularly, it's hard to believe this is real. That montage from the 1998 version of Mulan is so legendary because everything Mulan does is earned through sheer struggle, hard work, and her intelligence, which is the one thing that makes her a more formidable soldier and leader than anyone else in the Chinese army. She doesn't have superpowers. She can't beat men through sheer strength, stamina, and athletic ability. She is a woman, and women are, like it or not, athletically inferior to men in terms of their biology, but Mulan succeeds and thrives through more believable means, showing how a regular woman can succeed regardless of her biological limitations, as long as she has the capacity to think. And all of this is earned. In the Mulan live-action adaptation, Mulan reaches the top of the mountain because she has superpowers. That's it. That's all there is to it. It's absolutely abysmal. Also, the Huns aren't in this, though the main villain bears heavy resemblance to Shan Yu. But because they changed his name, and he has virtually no character whatsoever, I don't remember his name. I mean, even though he does have some motivation as a character, he wants to kill the Emperor to avenge his father, whereas the villain in the 1998 animated version was intimidating as hell. Shan Yu's love for battle and his yearning for dominance over China was simple, but still way more compelling for the character as an antagonist to be feared. But this discount version of him in the live-action version was an embarrassment. And like Shan Yu, the bad guys are essentially the discount Han army. That's right. In this, the bad guys are instead called the Rorons. I'm not even joking. And you may as well call them the morons after I break down the next scene. Now we come to yet another aped scene from the animated classic, the avalanche scene. Yes, this is still in the movie, and boy oh boy is it stupid. Instead of Mulan using a cannon to trigger the avalanche after the bad guys charge in recklessly, Mulan pulls a "hey, over here, shoot me" tactic, and the bad guys turn their trebuchet and fire what can only be described as the most retarded misfire in cinema history, where they miss Mulan by a country mile as if they are actively trying to hit the mountain behind her, and this causes the massive avalanche, which wipes out what's left of their army. No, I am not making this up. This is their way of paying homage to the animated classic, and once again, it fails so spectacularly. Who is the single-celled organism that wrote this garbage? The one scene they do that mimics the original animated classic that somewhat lives up to it is Mulan's reunion with her father. This is the only scene I can say bears some emotional resemblance to the original, though the animated version played out far more elegantly and beautiful, with its music and emphasis on visuals, not dialogue. Sure, there was some dialogue spoken, but you didn't really need it to feel the emotion of the scene. And the soundtrack, as well as the near flawless character development up to that point, made the moment in the animated version that much more impactful. So while the scene in the live-action version wasn't horrible, it still pales in comparison. But now with all those comparisons out of the way, let's talk about the action itself. When I thought I was signing up to watch a live-action adaptation for Mulan, I had no idea I was paying for some mutant, Titanfall, Matrix, superhero crossbreed with the original source material of the animated classic. The action in this movie feels like it comes straight out of the worst of the MCU. Style over substance. The majority of which is dreadful, and what there is that isn't terrible is painfully mediocre. Mulan actually kills her final boss by kicking an arrow with pinpoint precision straight across the sky and into his chest. That is actually the level of ludicrous we have reached. I shouldn't have to make this point. Mulan is not the bloody Matrix. Why is there wall running? Ridiculous acrobatics that make it look like Mulan is using the Force. And not to mention, Mulan's skill to this degree is complete and utter bullshit. The movie depicts her as someone who has trained her whole life in secrecy before coming to the army, but nobody self-taught, except for the worst characters, can self-teach themselves to this degree of skill. Armed combat and acrobatics is incredibly dangerous and requires supervised instruction for lengthy periods of time before one can train themselves safely. And even still, without a partner to train with, you can't maintain your level of technique because you aren't looking from the outside in. Over time, you can't gauge your timing, you lose posture, your footwork falters, you get sloppy because there's nobody to train with. And you're telling me Mulan got most of her skill by training parkour on her own as a youth and twirling and kicking swords and spears across the fucking mountain range she grew up on? Give me a bloody break. But on top of all that, like Rey from the Star Wars sequel trilogy, Mulan has been given a ludicrous power level and has essentially taught herself everything. And Disney's way of explaining this is that she has high chi. Stop asking questions. This is so fundamentally retarded, and these writers should be ashamed. You'll notice, based on what I've criticized the live-action Mulan for, that the classic version doesn't falter in any of these areas I've criticized. And in addition to not having these flaws, the writing in the animated version excels to the highest degree. There is nothing mediocre about it. Character, story, humor, villains, stakes, charm, soundtrack, artwork, action. Nothing whatsoever is mediocre like its live-action counterpart. But before I wrap up this mess, let me discuss a few bright spots in the movie. A few tiny instances where I'm willing to give a little bit of praise. Instances where I saw the massive potential this movie had that it did not deliver on. I said in the beginning of this video, this live action adaptation could have added some things to feel fresh despite being a remake. There is a nice little scene between Mulan and her father, which wasn't in the animated version. It plays out like it's their last conversation. Mulan tells him that had she been born a son, he wouldn't have to go to war, and her father says he wouldn't change anything about his life. He wouldn't change her if it meant saving his own life. This scene was easily the best new addition this film had to offer, and it honestly infuriates me because it shows the potential this mess had before it was butchered to hell. There's also Mulan's first night in the army. The actress absolutely nailed it. She's terrified, as she should be, as anyone would be when they're out of their comfort zone, miles from home, surrounded by strange individuals, strangers, in a life or death situation where they cannot let the other people discover their true identity. This is the one brief part of the film where I actually connected to Mulan on a human level. In the animated version, Mushu was introduced to prevent the film from feeling too depressing. Despite Mulan's bleak situation, Mushu enabled Mulan to keep her spirits high through all of her struggle. But this scene in the live-action adaptation wasn't in the animated version, but it added something of substance to the film. Despite being different, it felt fresh. Mulan in the animated classic meets Mushu before she gets into the army. But in this live-action adaptation, Mushu could have made his presence known during her training, helping her turn things around, act as her guardian angel to give her someone to lean on, while he fulfills his own schemes unbeknownst to her, which is consistent with his character as the deceptive, mischievous dragon we know him as. But it allows you to keep the best of both worlds. The realistic grit from the original Chinese ballad, Mulan being scared and terrified when she first arrives to the army. But you also get to keep the uplifting, lovable character from the Disney classic. Like I said, there is a way to connect to both audiences. And this is how it should have been done. And finally, let's talk about Discount Shan Yu's witch sidekick. This character, while making no sense to be in this film, as it isn't consistent with the realism of the original ballad or the 1998 animated film, Despite this, she did have something to offer in terms of character. She's portrayed as Mulan's equal who chose a darker path because of her gifts. She was exiled, abandoned, and hated by everyone she knew. And she's helping the morons to start a new world where she's welcome for her gifts. The problem is that she exists solely to justify the very plot point that ruins Mulan's character in the first place. I'm not against the idea of magic in Mulan. After all, Mushu is a resurrected guardian dragon, so there are light fantasy elements in this story. But while this witch character has some depth, she's utilized all wrong. If you want the same dynamic between Mulan that fits the core of who Mulan is, then you'd essentially have to change the character. If she's just Shan Yu's sidekick with magic powers, that's totally static as a character and acts like his henchman, that's fine. It's just a new element for the same story. That doesn't affect Mulan whatsoever, but if you wanted to have a two sides of the same coin dynamic with Mulan, have her be a soldier who was trained for war since she was a young girl in the Moron army. Have her backstory and yearning for battle be entirely driven by custom and supported by her family, as opposed to Mulan's choice to take up arms, which was driven by circumstance and love for her father, as well as a choice to find her calling because she didn't fit in anywhere else. This other warrior has been supported on her warrior's endeavor her whole life, while Mulan has been hindered by her customs. This other warrior is far more skilled and proficient in battle than Mulan is, but Mulan is able to hold her own through hard work and quick wit, which distinguishes her as a human being and as a woman in an army full of men. You get the same dynamic between characters, two sides of the same coin, a character to match Mulan as her equal, without betraying the core of who Mulan is. And you disregard this superpower made-up chi nonsense that ruins the message Mulan is ultimately meant to portray. The message I got from the original Disney classic, the 1998 version of Mulan, was that women don't have to conform to succeed in life. They can succeed at whatever they want just by being themselves, making brave choices, persevering through hard work and determination, and using their wits and their courage. They can succeed by being unique, by being who they are. Mulan's live-action adaptation is very unclear in which message it's trying to portray, but what I took from it was, if you are a woman who is naturally gifted and superior in every possible way, don't let men bring you down. It tries to mimic the theme of staying true to yourself that the original Mulan conveyed so well, but in the context of the live-action adaptation, Mulan staying true to herself is essentially use your superpowers because that's what makes you better than everyone anyway. Who in the actual hell relates to that? Seriously, who would place that abortion of a message, of a theme, over the best damn character journey in a Disney film that was depicted in the original 1998 animated version? To summarize, Mulan 2020, the live-action movie, is an utter failure. It ruins the lovable, relatable character Mulan has always been to fit the modernized agenda of social politics for what a strong female character should be, powerful and unchallenged, instead of becoming powerful through challenge, which is what always made Mulan compelling as a character and her story timeless. She faces almost no trials throughout this movie. She is better than everyone else from day one. Her most courageous moment is when she does something monumentally stupid. All of the magic from the original animated classic has been sucked dry from this product. There is none of the iconic songs. All of the iconic side characters, Shang, Mushu, and Mulan's grandmother, have been ripped out, and the ones that they have left, Yao, Ling, and Chimpo, have been left as unrecognizable shells that exist only to reference the better film. The humor is completely non-existent. This film is completely dry in terms of charisma and charm. This film, whilst giving a middle finger to the animated classic, tries to shamelessly reference it by recreating the iconic scenes, and they fail miserably at just about every attempt. And this was all done under the banner of trying to make a more gritty, realistic interpretation for the Chinese audience that just so happens to be governed by superpowers, magical wishes, and the most retarded action I've ever seen in a Disney film, and possibly any film. They wanted to make a more realistic film, supposedly, and they still screwed it completely up with a ton of fantasy elements that don't belong, and that make this film anything but realistic. Disney's Mulan is easily the worst film of 2020 that I have seen thus far. A film I was excited for despite all of its horrible marketing, suggesting it was going to be a dumpster fire, And despite my worries about Mulan's poor handling from over a year ago, I still held out hope that this movie could have been something special, something memorable for all of the right reasons, something worthy of the name Mulan. But what Disney has churned out is easily the most insulting product of an iconic character that I've seen since Star Wars The Last Jedi and Game of Thrones Season 8. And I'm not being hyperbolic in any sense of the word. They turned Mulan into a hybrid monstrosity of Rey and Captain Marvel. And it absolutely sickens me, just like I'm sure it sickens all of you. In preparation for the worst, several months ago I made this lengthy review of Mulan, the greatest Disney movie ever made, and I explain in vivid detail why that film is so bloody awesome. In case you'd like to cleanse yourself of the Disney live-action disaster, I strongly suggest you check that video out once you're done here. I worked extremely hard on it. It was essentially my love letter to that iconic film. And aside from the minor mistake of labeling Anastasia as a Disney film, I'm happy in saying that it's easily one of my best videos. Though Disney did not make the task easy. I had to edit and re-upload 25 separate versions of that video before Disney wouldn't block it worldwide upon being published. It's one of the reasons this video has such bare bones editing, so my apologies on that. I didn't want to risk any complications on getting my thoughts about the Mulan live action film up for my audience, because I had so much to say, and I wanted to say it. And unlike the Mulan animated video, this film doesn't deserve the same love and care as I put into that review for its counterpart. The Mulan live action movie deserves to be buried and forgotten, and so does the modern political cesspool that Disney has become. And with that all said, I humbly bring this video to its end. Thank you all so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider staying for the outro. So firstly, I want to say thanks to all of my patrons and channel members for all of your contributions to the channel. Your generosity is truly humbling and it helps me out a great deal, so thank you. If you like my content and would like to support the channel with a monthly donation, even if it's just $1 per month, the link to Patreon is in the description, and you can become a channel member by hitting the join button below. Secondly, if you haven't already, please consider checking out the channel's Discord server. What Discord basically is an online community where followers of this channel go to congregate and talk about a range of different topics, including, but not limited to, classic Disney movies. You can discuss your favorite Disney films, and you can discuss your least favorites. Take a wild guess at what my most hated Disney movie now is. Anyway, I hope you check it out, and who knows, maybe you'll make some friends along the way. Also, if you've been following the channel for a while, be sure to check out the channel merchandise store if you want to pick up some new threads with inside references to past videos and live streams. Wear your colors proud and support the channel at the same time. And if you're looking for more content, I've left some more links for you in the description, including a link to my second channel. I hope you find something to your liking. Finally, here's one last thank you for staying till the end of the video. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time.